First they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I am not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I am not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I am not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Martin Niemöller.
Cash in, cash out. Brody took the street route, speeding through the fast lane, trying not to crash out. Poverty was passed down, couldn't afford a different route. No one meet him in the streets, he won't hit the church house. Luxury the heart of me, but these streets still a part of me. I gave God all of me, no saying sick and tired of me. I came up about them bricks, I know my brother's proud of me. Demons had me on the fence, I know my mama proud of me. Know my mama pray for me, pray for my girl, she made for me. Know these rappers make believe, they make it up like Maybelline. Remember days thought I was done, I said it won't no saving me. Now I'm feeling like the one that's really made to say the streets. Bags made it spaz out, cash in, cash out. Money coming fast now, topping off his pastels. Blues and pinks won't save a thing, but it made life a little easier.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us on tonight for another podcast of The Ish. Remember that the views shared on the Ish podcast are rooted in real experiences and honest conversations. We're not here to give perfect answers, but to explore the truth. Well, our one story, one perspective on Ish at a time. Our goal is to build bridges between faith, fatherhood, and the future. Listener discretion is advised, not for content, but for conviction. What we're doing on tonight, we're going to talk to you. We have distinguished gentlemen on tonight who are going to come and just share our whole concept of our testimony of fatherhood and fathers as coaches. And on tonight we have my friend Mr. Eddie White, and he's going to explain who he is. I'm going to let him introduce himself, as well as my other friend Ron Atkinson. Eddie, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing well. Good to see you again.
The pleasure is mine. See, like we just saw each other a few seconds ago. So, please tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your background, and some things that you're doing now.
Yes, I'll give you abbreviated version because you get old. I can go back to when I was in my mother's womb, back in 1972. But I am I go by Eddie, but I tell people my name is James Edward White Jr.
Yeah.
And the reason why I go by Eddie is obviously I'm a junior, so my dad was James, that uncle, cousins, and I'm the younger in the sort of generation. So I got Eddie, and I tell people my family wasn't a Jimbo family, so I go by Eddie. And I'm from Pennsylvania. I was born in Pittsburgh. Of course, I tell people who ask, I'm not a Steelers fan. There's a whole backstory I won't get into on that. But I went to school in the University of Georgia. So I also tell people I got some Southern in me. My wife's from Georgia. I got my degree from there in chemistry, got commissioned in the Army, and I did 28 and a half years in the Army as an officer. So I traveled, all over the world. Obviously I deployed. I was in the Pentagon. I was in Germany. I spent time in Kansas and Alabama.
Yeah.
And then I also, my wife, even though she's from Georgia, we met in a place called Fort Polk, Louisiana, a place you probably don't want to go to, and a place I have no intent of going back to. And but we met because she was in the military. Had my oldest daughter there, and back in 1995, had my second daughter in 1997. So they're obviously grown. My oldest is married, so I have a son-in-law. My oldest daughter also has two sons, and actually the second was born Sunday at 6:30. So I am a brand new second-time grandfather, which is exciting. And so I've been obviously leading my family for 30 plus years. I've been married for over 30 years, and wrote a book about how my wife and I raised our daughters to be empowered young women. And so I transitioned in 2022 out of the military, but I started my business in 2019, which is what I do full time now that I retired. And that business was founded on my book. And I started doing fathers raising daughters classes. I did that for about 2 years or so, virtually with fathers all over the country. I then expanded my business to cover formally leadership. So I'm an adjunct professor out of college here in Norfolk, Virginia. I do
Wonderful.
organizational consultation and organizational management in that space. I do legacy, which is my parent education. I actually just had a class today at an elementary school in Norfolk, Virginia, with about 15 parents excited and talking to them about how do
Wow.
you raise your child to be a functional, independent adult. And so that
Yes.
parenting class I do at 2 or 3 schools here in Norfolk. I used to do it up in Maryland. I've been doing that for several years. And then my third L is
Yes.
my literacy line. So I have a copyrighted
Wow.
framework to help people live their life, factoring in all the different things that could contribute or take away from. So, what are your aspirations? What are your expectations? How do you figure personal, professional goals? And my framework help people be oriented where they have clarity and certainty in what they're trying to do. So,
Wow.
that's kind of a little bit about me personally, a little bit about me professionally, and a little bit of my backstory.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. Look, we have Archie and we have Rod on also. And we're going to ask them to cut, if they don't mind, if they can cut they're open to cut their cameras on unless they're not in a position to do so. But give me a thumbs up or something to let me know that you're on the air. Because right now all we're doing is we're introducing our guests. But look, you gave me so much. You gave me so much. Your book. What is the title of your book?
So, the
Like,
title
what's
of
your
my book
title?
is Yeah, the title of my book is Start Point Parenting in the White House. And I tell people White House is not a political book. My last name is White. And so we used to use a term. And actually, the catch was back in the day, and you remember, Howard, when you had answer machines, I had on the answer machine when I worked in the Pentagon, you reached the White
Yes.
House. And it would mess up my friends' kids because they're like, oh, you're calling in the DMV and the White House. But it's called Start
Yes.
Point Parenting in the White House and Raising Empowered Young Women Through a Father's Eyes. So it's my perspective
Wow.
about what does it take to equip your daughters to be
Yeah.
empowered women in America. So you can find it on Amazon. If you look up J. Edward White Jr., if you look up Start Point, then you'll find it. And it just kind of
Okay.
gives different stories, gives different insights. And actually, I built
Yes.
my parent education model, which is also copyrighted, founded on a
Yes.
lot of stuff that I reflected on and wrote about in my book.
That's amazing. Say that title again because I want to make sure that I get it correct.
Yeah, start
Parenting.
point. So just like your
Start point.
starting from the start.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason I
Okay.
use start point, Howard, is I tell people, we all have our start. My father, who was born in 1945, wrote the foreword, and he didn't know his
Yes.
father. His mother left when he was 13. But
Yes.
when you lead your household, you can be the start point for your legacy. So it's
You
both
know,
contextually understanding, but also empowering to be an individual start for your legacy
yes.
line.
As Ron comes on, I'm going to ask him to turn his camera to sideways. It looks like he's breakdancing. So when Ron comes on, turn your camera. I'll let you see. You know. Hey, Ron. Turn your camera the other way, my friend. Turn your camera the other way, Ron.
You should know better. He's a media person. You should know about camera
Yes.
orientation.
I just wanted to do that because look, man, hey, Ron has the most infectious laugh, and I wanted to get that laugh online because he has an amazing laugh. But I share with my son, a little bit about myself. My father. I met my father when I was 28 years old.
Mm.
Amazing story. I'd already had one son, and I had two sons at the time. And my wife and I, we've been married for 35 years this year. Also, we're closer to 36. No, we're still closer to 35. And and we have our oldest son just turned 31 this month. And so it's and I said, honey, had we gotten pregnant when you first got married, um, you have a 36-year-old child. She was like, wow. She don't want to tell me about the 31-year-old child. But
Mm.
I met my father when I was 30, when I was 28 years old. And the amazing story is I'm Howard Langford Jr., and we both worked out at Bally's. Me down here and him up in D.C. And so Bally's called me about their new senior citizens program that they had. And I'm like, okay, I'm 28 years old. I'm not a senior citizen. And they said, aren't you Howard Langford? I said, yes. And Howard Clifton Langford? I said, yes. And then they began to give me the address, which was my father's address, who I've been looking for in D.C. forever.
Wow.
And they gave me the address. My wife called the phone company the next day and got his phone number because she wouldn't give us the phone number at Bally's. And I said, my wife said, that's your dad because I'm a little clueless. I'm like, Okay, yeah. And so we called him, and we met my father that weekend. I drove up to Oxon Hill, Maryland, to meet my dad. And this is the thing. People say that dads aren't necessary and all of these types of things. And I share with them. I met him at Safeway, a very convenient place that said meet me at Safeway, which is all around DC at the time. Safeway and Shoppers, they're all up in
Yeah.
DC. The grocery stores, and and out of all the hundreds of people that were out there in the parking lot, when I laid eyes on my dad, every question about my life was answered before we had a conversation.
Wow.
Fathers are so important. I work with juveniles who are caught up, who have entangled themselves in the criminal justice system now. And one of my young people said to me, we were talking about just life choices, and he said to me, "Well, I don't need my dad. Dads aren't important." I began sharing with him the importance of a father. Now, my father, if we sat down and we're talking, we did have some questions. I didn't really have any questions, but he said, "Son, there's nothing you can't answer me that I won't answer." He began to tell me about his life, and the first thing he said, "Son, the one time I was innocent, I got framed for murder." I'm like, "Hold on. The one time he was innocent?" That's all I heard. I mean, how many bodies you got buried around DC, man? I mean, and then he began to share his story and our lineage and people that we're related to, and I began to find out the greatness that's actually in my family, even through the struggles and the turmoil of growing up. He grew up without his father. His father ran away from home. My great grandfather, who he shared with me, is Jack Johnson, who everybody no Sam Langford. Everybody feared Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson feared one man, Sam Langford, my great
Wow.
grandfather. And so he began to share with me just different people that's in our family. I began to feel the lineage and the strength of fathers. And at that point, I felt invincible. At that point. And
Yeah.
so it's really important the role of fathers and fathering. You know, um, and so I love your book Starting Point. I'm going to have to make sure that I go and let everybody know about this book. And I have four sons and a daughter, and I share with them I could have easily been a girl dad. As much as I love my sons, every dad needs a daughter. I'm telling you, every dad needs a daughter. And there's RT. There's RT. Every dad needs. Well, every time I cut him on, he goes off. So maybe he doesn't want to come on camera. Every dad needs a daughter, you know. And so, okay, yeah, every dad needs a daughter. He says he sees Eddie. I don't see Eddie, but every dad needs a daughter, and um, because I would tell my sons that if I died and if I passed out in the living room and died, they step across me every day. I smell and all of that, and they keep walking across me until the food was gone in the house. They were like, "Dad was sleeping for days. What's wrong with Dad?" But my daughter will be the first one to walk up to me and make sure that I'm good. You know. So but let me ask you a question, Eddie. From your experience, how has fatherhood changed over the decades, and in terms of discipline, communication, and cultural expectations? We'll take it one at a time. How has fatherhood changed in terms of discipline over the
So
decade?
yeah, I think so. I think there's. So I'll answer it one way, and then I'll answer it a second way, which is contextual to discipline. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think there's one thing I tell when I teach parents and fathers, I tell people there
Yeah.
are certain things that are sort of human nature, and then there's other things that sort of the character of the time. So years ago, I had a
Yeah.
boss that talked about there's the nature of war and the character of war, and he contrasted them.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's I didn't quite pick up initially, but the nature of war, he says, is not going to change. It is, the
Mm-hmm.
violence, the destruction. There's certain things that is the nature of war. When you go into war, things happen regardless of whether you did it 5,000 years ago, 500 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, or 50 years from now. But then he said the character of war changes. Years ago
Mm-hmm.
you had swords. then you had machine guns, now you got drones. But so the character, the technology, the character of war changes, but the nature of war doesn't. And I found
Gotcha.
that fascinating because when you think about parenting, you think
Yeah.
about fathers, agnostic
Yes.
of culture or, any other factor, parenting
Yes.
and fatherhood, there's a nature to it tied to human nature, tied to the generational difference you're always going to have. Because no matter what, if you're a parent, you're going to be older than your kids. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
disconnect from them because they're going to be more current in certain things. But the nature of parenting indoors, you still need to
Yes.
lead, you still need to provide, you still need to protect, you still need to do things that are incumbent upon a parent
Mm-hmm.
once you bring in someone into this earth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the character can change. So when you get into discipline, or we talk about culture, different questions you ask, the question is, what are the characteristics or the character of those things relative to 1940 or 1950? And it's fascinating
Or
that you
even
asked that, Howard.
1960.
Yeah,
Or
or even
even
1960.
1960. Yeah.
And so it's fascinating that you asked that because in my parenting class today, one of the last things I did, I showed the parents a video. And the video was of a scene from Fences. And I don't know if you saw Fences with
I've seen it a
Denzel.
few times. Both
And
the
it's the
James Earl
scene.
Jones and the brother. How do you think of Denzel Washington's name? You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I said
And
James Earl Jones and Denzel Washington version.
yeah, yeah, okay. You saw both the stage play as well. So in the movie, the scene I showed was when the son came out and said, "Do you like me?" Or "Why don't you like
Yeah.
me?" And Denzel just went the
Yeah.
whole thing. I ain't got to like you, and he talked to him about
Mm-hmm.
what he did, and he bringing putting a roof over his head and food on his table.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
fascinating thing is, I watched that movie with my parents. And my dad was born in 1945. And I told you he didn't
Yeah.
know his dad. So he was raised early on by his
Yeah.
granddad. So if you think generationally, we're
Yeah.
talking about, 19, his granddad was probably born in the 20s, probably only 50 years after slavery.
Yep.
When we get into culture, it ties in because
Yeah.
black fathers are
Wow.
probably the least experienced generationally as leading families. But if you go to that, he was raised in the model of, I ain't got to like you. I ain't got, I'm going to model. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to put
Mm-hmm.
food on the table. And that's what he said his granddad told him. And so you
Mm.
fast forward to when he raised me. Now, my dad, we had a more open relationship and we talked, but I was scared of my dad until I was 16, 17, right? And it took
Yeah.
a while before I really got into a level of depth with relationship with my
Yeah.
dad. And then you transition to how I raised my girls, where I was a lot more forward with communicating
Yeah.
and how I talk to them. So if you take that generationally, the discipline is twofold:
Yes.
disciplining them to recognize what has consequence and what's important, and the physical
Yes.
discipline of making sure that they understand the ramifications when they don't. And I think
Yeah.
that flows based off the character of the parent. And the parent
Yeah.
may be averse to it. The parent may be sort of, that's the way it's always been. That's the way I'm going to do it. Or the parents may embrace whatever it is. So I think discipline is relative to the parent and the time, but the
Yeah.
nature of disciplining our children to understand how to do things, to recognize
Yes.
things, to understand importance transcends time period. That makes sense.
Well, when you say that, you just really struck something in me because transgenerationally, fathers had not been allowed to father.
Mm,
Think about that. You just said that, and you missed out a whole generation of fatherhood with your grandfather, where you missed your father's generation to father you pretty much.
mm,
That's a whole generation that you're missing. And so a lot of times what we're doing is we're building off of broken generations. But this is something that just really struck me. Black mothers have always had a chance to be a black mother. Why? Because they raised white children.
mm. Yeah.
They raised white families in the home while the black father was out raising and doing the farm work. But the black mother was nursing the white child. And in her spare time, she could nurse her own child. And I think that's an interesting dynamic. I think that's worthy of a book. I'll ask my wife to write because she's an author as well, you know. And I can't speak on motherhood, but that's just something. But as far as transgenerationally, fathers not being able to properly father, and then when we're looking at things statistically, and these aren't necessarily our statistics, but these are statistics that are often thrown out. about the things that are happening in America and in our country and actually globally, that are saying how we are disproportionately in homes without fathers.
Yeah.
And why is that when at one point fathers were crossing oceans to find their families, and then they get to a point in after the 70s and the 80s, actually the early 80s, when our families were really becoming stronger. And then there was this war on drugs, and it really hurt a lot of our families. When I'm looking at some of the data, drugs was not really a part of our culture at that point. It became a part of our culture when it began to ruin the factories and cars on us and families, and ruin the economics of black families where fathers had to go somewhere else to find work. And and so missing that link between and so your book Starting Point reminds me of, I would tell my son, because we had a conversation, and he's making pretty good money, and we had a conversation about being raised in our home with my wife and myself, and I said, well, son, you have to realize I started in the basement. I had to work up to be broke. I had to work up to a place where I couldn't measure up to your friends and what they could provide. My only goal, which was probably a bad goal, but my foremost goal was to remain married and to remain committed.
Hey, Howard, I can't hear anything. I
You
have no
can hear?
audio.
Okay, let's see. My main goal was to remain. Let's see. My main goal was to remain married and committed, and I'll try to get you on. And I should have had another goal of providing. I was able to provide, but just in a modicum place of providing. And so I'm interested to know about Starting Point even a little bit more. And then, Ron, I can hear you. I can hear you, Ron. I can't hear you. So I'll give you a thumbs up. If you can text me, I'll give him a thumbs up when I want him to when he can talk. But yeah. But yeah, so tell me about that. Having missed that generation.
You mean for my dad? Kind of how that?
Yes.
I think. Well, for him, and so Start Point is led in with him being raised by his grandparents. Being born in 1945, raised by his grandparents. His mother left when he was 13. I think never knew his dad, and so he was. And you see a lot in my parenting classes. You have grandparents who are raising the kids, and
Yeah.
so you have there's a natural separation in generations because obviously you're 15 to 20 to 30 years older than your kid. Well, 15, but I do know I say 15. I know parents and mothers. In fact, one of the grandmothers in my class today was 15 when she had her kid. So 15 sounds like dying a big distance, but and I know another friend of mine, she was 13 when she had her kid.
Yeah.
So you're going to be anywhere from 13 to 30 years older than your kids. So that creates sometimes communication, cultural attuneness, the different ways things change, understanding of the times, patience, energy, that all comes in. When the grandparent does it, it sort of amplifies the separation, right? They're older, old school. They're, they may be less patient. They may have less energy, to kind of invest in everything that's going on. So I think that's where you start to lose it. As far as the connectiveness, my dad was blessed in that he went to foster care, and a mother and a daughter raised him. And they, and he writes in there how they were important. For them, they prioritized school and they prioritized church, and they kind of carried on with his grandparents. So he didn't affected him as much as potentially it could. He just took that into how he raised us. But yeah, I think there is potential. But I was fortunate. I think my dad was fortunate that it wasn't as significant where it caused him not to be able to, really be a great father. And it's funny, just real quick, Howard, you say that about, what is your expectation? When I was talking to, when I talk to parents, it's that, you set your expectation. I advise a lot of younger parents this right now, including my kid, my daughter. I got a nephew and a niece who have kids who are under 2 years old. And I tell them, I said, look, this is my recommendation. I said, you need to think about what are the 3 or 4 things that's most important for your child to be as an adult. And then I
Yeah.
would say, have your wife, or your husband come up with the 3 or 4 things that's most important for in their view for their
Wow.
child, your child to be an adult. And then
Yeah.
when they turn about 4 years old or over the next 4 years, if they're young, y'all should have a conversation and then you two should decide what are the top 3 things between your 3 or 4, his 3 or 4, and those 3 or 4 things becomes your anchor over the next 15 to 20 years to make sure your children demonstrate that characteristics. It'll help the parents get aligned. It has clarity in what you're
Yes.
doing this for, and you don't lose that focus like you talked about, where you sort of minimize, but you kind
Yeah.
of stay like, I'm raising this child to be an adult. But what does that
Yeah.
mean? Because it's defined differently by every household. But if you don't define it, you may not actually invest in it. So you want your kid to be able to manage
Wow.
money, but you never did anything to teach them money. You want them to be a
Yeah.
healthy relationship, but you never did anything to
Yeah.
teach. But if you think about it and you do it, then you tend to invest the energy to have it happen. So that's just something I
Yeah.
also offer too.
Well, I love that. One of the things I love and that my wife and I were excited about is that we were there and being present with your children.
Hmm.
It's important to be present. I remember a time, and I was helping my mom move. She was moving into a one-story home. She had got to the age where she didn't need stairs anymore, and so she was moving to a one-story home. And and I had a family member who was helping me move things. Now, and for a long time, this family member would always take shots at me. A male family member would just take shots at me for no reason. And and I think I got to the point where I became frustrated because there were times he would take these shots at me in front of my sons. I don't believe in emasculating men. I don't believe in doing that type of things. I praise in public, I criticize in private. So when he did that, I said, "Hey, I've got to leave in 10 minutes." And then he gave me another one of those shots at me. And I was leaving because my son had a football game. And I know my son. I told my son out there, and I moved all the heavy furniture onto the truck anyway. There was nothing left but books. And my uncle, well, the family member took one of those shots at me. And I said, I throw grown men around for a living. And I looked at him like that,
Mm.
you know. And it took about maybe 10 years before he said, maybe 12 years before he made another shot, took another shot at me. And I said to him, I said, when my son looks up at the stands, he's looking for his dad. Whether he's playing or just running out of play,
Hmm.
he's going to look in the stand for his dad. I want to make sure that he sees his dad in the stand. And at that time, then I left, when I
Mm.
was done. And so it's important that we're present with our children because, what happens is that they look for us
Yeah.
and we have to be present. One of my sons, as frustrated as they were growing up, and I was always around,
Hmm.
right? Um, that when they got older and now they have wives, they're saying, "Dad, I'm so thankful that you were always around, that you
Mm.
you stayed with mom." And I know how it was tough at times, because sometimes there are outside things that can affect your marriage. And I've been a pastor for years, and church can really affect your marriage. It
Mm.
can, because sometimes you got to take time off from home, from church, to
Mm.
to go and do things at home.
Yeah.
And your family don't realize that. I got a bit of time off from church to go cut my grass, And I realized that, and I think after our 30th year of marriage, we nearly didn't make it. And
Mm.
every year we always had those moments like, we can make it another year. And after that 30th year was a final exam. And I realized, we couldn't even have a conversation, my wife and I. I would text her, she would text me back, right? I had my bag packed and she had the door open. That's how it was,
Wow.
right? And I realized this. Again, my short-sightedness and short goals in marriage was this. My number one goal was to be faithful and committed.
Okay.
And I realized that my wife was my mistress and my ministry was my wife.
Wow.
And I had some reworking and some rewiring to do because the way I was trained is that kind of like when they teach you in the Navy. Now, of course, I was never there, but I heard a lot of stories that if they wanted to wipe, if the Navy wanted you to have a wipe, they would put it
That
in
would
the sea
issue one.
bag.
Yeah. That's what he said in the army too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the way it was with ministry for me. The pastors that trained me said, "Hey, man, God first, family second." So
Mm.
But Ron, can you hear us? Ron, no. Archie's on. Archie's playing Groundhog Day. Ron, I'm going to send Ron something in the chat. Maybe he can. Okay, let's see if he picks up on that. All right. Let's see if they can't say anything. But I think we've had maybe one more question, and whoever can hear this. Um, in an age of social media and shifting gender roles, what does being a present and engaging father look like to you? And
So I guess,
let
I
me
mean,
begin. I'll give you a chance to think about that.
okay.
So I think about this, when our fathers were fathering. Now, of course, the way my father got his money, I'm sure he told me a story, and he was probably one of the most feared men in DC, which
Mm.
kind of kept me from trying to go into the Secret Service, you know. But I'm named after him, so, but I've heard some stories. But, I know that my goal was just, I'd share with you my goals. Um, and then as as we got older, as children got older, I had more understanding and listening to my children and talking to them and hearing them. And my wife was taking some classes at Norfolk State. Um, and my wife taught me this. And here I was an educator and everything, that the child's full brain is not fully developed until they're around 27, 28, 25. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're expecting them to understand consequences, and they don't. And
Mm.
so you have to
Yeah.
talk to them in future terms. And so it taught me to tell my son, I know you're going to make mistakes. Don't make a mistake so big I can't help you out of it.
Mm.
You know. So and that was something that wouldn't have happened in my generation with my dad had he been around.
Yeah.
Boys gonna be boys is what they're gonna say.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how shifting gender roles, if we could say that, has changed. Um,
Yeah. I think, I'm not sure the implication of shifting gender roles. I think that as a father, as a man, and
mm-hmm,
as a father, which, fairly black and white. So when there's a part where you're the head of the household, right? So you lead
mm-hmm,
your family. And I believe that father, we are intended to lead, to protect, and to provide. That's what we're charged to do. And I think that, that comes with being present. That comes with being
mm-hmm.
present, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And your children should appreciate and they should feel your
Yeah,
presence. When you walk
yes,
into a room, it should be noticed, the ripple, if you will, because
yeah,
you are the head of the household. You are the father, and you are, the leader, one of the leaders. I believe in partnered leadership, and we each have roles. And you appreciate that being married, 30 years or
yeah,
so. But there is
yeah,
still a head of household, and
yes,
there's no ambiguity in my household that I'm the head of household.
yeah,
And so that has with it certain responsibilities.
yeah,
And so being present and providing and protecting, to me, constitutes being all in. And the gender dynamic, because I raised girls, I was cross gender. But when I
yeah, yeah,
brought my
yeah.
son-in-law into the house,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
into our home, one thing I did, because
mm-hmm.
I was keen on expanding. And I'll give you a quick side story on this, Howard. I was, when I
Sure.
was younger, I was on an airplane one time, and I think it was maybe an air
Yeah,
marshal, or you sit next to somebody on the
yeah,
plane and you talk to
yeah,
them and don't know who they are.
yes.
And I was telling him about raising my girls and what I was
Mm-hmm.
doing. And he made this comment. He said, Eddie, and I think I don't know if you remember my name, but he said, you can do all that with daughters, and they can marry somebody and jack it all up, and you have no control over them.
Wow,
And I was like,
wow.
man. So my daughters were, single digits or whatever. And I'm like, man, that is very disempowering. I mean, you talk about
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
discourages. And so I always sat in the back of my mind for years. And I'm a traditionalist, so DeAndre, my son, he asked me for my daughter's hand, and my wife was nervous whether I'll say yes. And there's some other things that preceded that really set up me kind of saying yes. But once they got engaged, once my oldest daughter and my son got engaged, I called DeAndre and I said, "Look, DeAndre," I said, "I don't know who raised you to be a man, who taught you how to lead a household, but this is what I want to do. I want to talk to you every month. I'll pick a topic, and I want to help. And what does it mean to come into my household?" And I said, "You don't have to tell Jalen, my daughter, anything. It's between me and you." And I think even this day, he hasn't told Jalen anything. And so for 1 month, for 1 year, this was 12 months prior, we talked every month. And 1 week, I'd hear my daughter and my wife talking about compromise, and Jalen understand what that was. And it was DeAndre's month. And guess what DeAndre wanted to talk about? Compromise. So I was able to give him my view, my insights about leading a household, about being the father in the home. And at the end of it, he goes, I probably knew about 50% of it, but 50% I didn't know. It gave him insights into my daughter, and it brought him into the family. He also had a level of accountability and responsiveness. So when I talked to him and my daughter, it wasn't me coming in as my daughter's father. It was me coming in as the head of the household. And I told him at the end, I said, "Look, DeAndre, I'll always respect and recognize you as the head of your household, but understand you always fall underneath my umbrella." And it created that hierarchical, which you naturally have in the biological sense. But now you're bringing in somebody who's going to be part. So I have 2 grandsons underneath them. And when I talk to them about marriage, I talk to them about raising my grandson. It's coming from a place where we both have a relationship. Obviously, mine's deeper with my daughter, but it's very present with my son. And so I think we as fathers, when you talk about being present and you talk about gender roles and you talk about legacy, there's a level of proactiveness that we can and should do as men, as leaders, that go across all aspects of the household.
That's good. That's that's interesting. Because again, I have 4 sons and 1 daughter, the daughter being the baby girl. And there's this young man that's kind of in her life, kind of. He's a really good classmate from college and all. And it was interesting when I met him. He brought my daughter some flowers after a performance at her school, and I'm like, okay, you know. And then the next day, I take my daughter to a restaurant and I see him there, and he's working. And I said, okay, isn't that the guy from last night? He goes, yeah, he works here. And he walks over to her and pulls her chair out. Like, okay. Now my oldest son, he had driven in from Charlotte to watch my daughter's performance, and she was at the Tech at the time. She graduated, and my son looked at me, and I looked at him. Now my son, I'm 6'4". My son's 6'5", 6'6", and and we looked at each other like, what's going on? But I loved the mannerism of this young man. I love the mannerism. And I don't know where that's gonna go, if it goes anywhere. But I love watching our children grow up.
Mm-hmm.
I love what is happening as our children grow up, and you do get a chance to see what you put in them, and how much they retain.
Yep.
You get a chance to see that, and as they get older, you get to see them add their own spin and their own flavor to it all. So, hey, look, I've held up so much of your time, and my friend Ron, can you hear us? No, he's off again. But I want to thank you so much. He was saying that he has no audio. They're having trouble with the audio here. Don't you having trouble with the audio? So I don't know if that's on my end, um, but I do want to thank you again. Any closing words you want to have for us, Eddie?
No, I think I'm glad. Yeah, I know you wanted 3. Hopefully I was sufficient. We got all the technical and all the audio and everything straight. So give Ron and Archie a little bit of a reprieve that you weren't here solo. Hopefully that some of the things that I offered really will cause your listeners to reflect upon. How do they fit in as a father? What does showing up mean? What does leadership me.
Yeah.
I think this is a great conversation, Howard. I enjoyed it,
I did too. Well, I have to say this though. One of the things I love that you said was inviting him and having a conversation with him once a month for about a year. That was amazing. That stuck with me because like it or lump it, I tell my daughter-in-law, both of them, how much they've added to our life. Now we raised our sons to be faithful and committed men. And one of the difficulties that they had looking for a girlfriend was that they wanted a thug. And my son's big, tall, athletic, but there were just certain things, and I think it came from the thing I shared with them, don't do anything that I can't help you out of.
Yeah, yeah.
So they were always within reach. And so, Ron, can you hear us? Can you hear us? No. Okay. And so I want to thank you again for being on. Maybe once I log you off, maybe he'll be able to hear me.
Yeah, yeah.
But thank you again. Starting point, we're going to look for that, okay? Next time we do this, we have to make sure that your book, we have a little video of your book so people can know how to get it and find it, okay?
Cool.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much,
All right,
thank you
Howard.
so much, my friend. God bless now.
You too. God bless.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay, can you hear me, Ron? Ron, can you hear me? Ron, can you hear me? Let's see. All right. Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us on the Ish, and we appreciate you taking the time out to join us on tonight. Tune in again next week when we have another topic that we're going to help. Again, the Ish is a program that is made for men 50-ish and above. And we're dealing with topics that are innate toward men. Thank you so much for joining us again.
First, they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I am not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I am not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I am not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Martin Niemöller.
Cash in, cash out. Brody took the street route, speeding through the fast lane, trying not to crash out. Poverty was passed down, couldn't afford a different route. No one meet him in the streets, he won't hit the church house. Luxury the heart of me, but these streets still a part of me. I gave God all of me, no saying sick and tired of me. I came up about them bricks, I know my brother's proud of me. Demons had me on the fence, I know my mama proud of me. Know my mama pray for me, pray for my girl, she made for me. Know these rappers make believe, they make it up like Maybelline. Remember days thought I was done, I said it won't no saving me. Now I'm feeling like the one that's really made to say the streets. Bags made it spaz out, cash in, cash out. Money coming fast now, topping off his pastels. Blues and pinks won't save a thing, but it made life a little easier.